Hello, my math friends. This is Mrs. Schlecht, and in this video, we're still solving some inequalities, but this time we're using multiplication or division. All right, so you know that before we get going, there's a few materials you need in order to be successful for this activity. First, you need your Envision book. Remember, we're in volume 2. Second, don't forget your math notebook so you can take those great notes and keep track of all of your wonderful math thinking. Third, don't forget that pencil to take those great notes. And fourth, last but certainly never ever least, that positive math attitude. All right, my friends, so this video goes really well with lesson 5-5 in your Envision Volume 2 book, of course. Very similar to what we did in that last video when we were solving these inequalities with either addition or subtraction. The only new thing is that now we're using multiplication or division. We're still going to graph it. We're still going to use those inverse or opposite operations to isolate that variable, make it all by its lonesome, so we can actually solve these inequalities. The key concepts for this lesson can be found on page 292. All right, my friends, so the first problem that we're going to be looking at together is on page 293, and it's number 6. Our inequality is 8m is less than or equal to 56. Now remember, when you have a coefficient, like the number 8, and it's right next to a variable, like the letter m, that's representing multiplication, right? So we're multiplying 8 times our mystery number, m, and that's how we get something that is less than or equal to 56, right? Now remember, in that last video, we talked about those inverse or opposite operations, right? Those operations that we use to undo our math. So think to yourself, my friends, if I used multiplication inside this inequality, well, how do I undo multiplying by 8? So to undo multiplying by 8, we'll divide by 8. And remember, my friends, whatever you do to one side of your inequality, you also need to do that to the other side of your inequality as well. Now, there's two different ways that we could write this. We could say that m is less than or equal to, remember, we're keeping that same inequality sign, to 56 divided by 8, right? You can write it as a fraction, but that's representing division. Or you could also say that m is less than or equal to, same inequality sign, 56 divided by 8. Either way, it means the same thing. But what happens when I multiply by 8, but then I divide by 8? That just cancels each other out, right? When you do an operation, but then you do the inverse or the opposite of that operation, it just cancels each other out. That's how we're able to get m all by its lonesome. So now think to yourself, my friends, what is 56 divided by 8? We know that m will be less than or equal to 7, right? Because 56 divided by 8 is 7. Now let's graph that. Here's what this solution to this inequality looks like on a number line. A nice little number line. So again, notice that I have some negative numbers over here, and then 0, and then our positive numbers. So again, 7 is our only frame of reference. That's our only location. That's why we have this circle above 7. Now you'll notice it's colored in. Why is it colored in? Because m is less than or equal to 7, right? That or equal to 7 means that 7 is a possibility, right? That's why we have that closed circle, my friends. Now, since m could also be less than 7, notice that our line is then pointing towards all of the numbers that would be less than 7. So we had an inequality, 8m is less than or equal to 56. We then divided by 8 on both sides to isolate that variable to get m all by itself. Once we did that division, we discovered that m needs to be less than or equal to 7. We graphed m being less than, this is the less than, or equal to 7 is that closed circle. All right, my friends, so the next problem that I'd like to look at together is on page 293, but now it's number 9. And we have m divided by -5 is greater than or equal to 2, a positive 2, all right? Couple things. Whenever, and this is important, so I'd maybe write this down in my notebook, just so you know. Whenever you're multiplying or dividing by a negative number, your inequality sign is going to switch, okay? I'll say that again. So whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, this inequality sign is going to switch, okay? I'll show you what I mean here in a second. But first, If I am dividing by -5, and that's how I ended up over here at +2, what's the inverse operation of -5, of dividing by -5? It'd be multiplying by -5. Remember, whatever you do to one side of your inequality, you also need to make sure that you do to the other side of your inequality. So remember, when I do the inverse operation of something, that cancels it out, right? So if we divided by -5, but then I'm multiplying by -5, that cancels each other out, and then we just have m, right? Remember, we need to do that to both sides of our inequality. Now, when I just said that whenever you multiply or divide an inequality by a negative number, the sign flips, that's what I mean right here. So we went from having a greater than or equal to now having a less than or equal to sign, right? So now we know that m needs to be less than or equal to 2 times -5, which we know is actually -10. Now let's graph this solution. So graphing this inequality solution on a number line will look like this, all right? Remember, we did switch our signs because we were dividing by a negative number, and then we multiplied by that negative number, right? That's how our inequality sign switched, right? So I still put that closed circle above the number -10 because -10 was our only location, our only point of reference for this inequality, right? It's a closed circle or it's colored in because of that or equal to option, right? And then it's pointed towards all of the numbers that would be smaller than -10. And remember, when we're in negative land, always think about the distance away from 0. The bigger the distance away from 0, the smaller the number, right? So -11, smaller than -10, -14, smaller than -10. That's why it's all pointed this way. All right, my friends, that was just a quick run through over solving some inequalities using multiplication or division. As always, if you have any other questions, please let me know.